Hi, Barry here. Today we turn our attention to the theory of production. This is the first lesson in a series of lessons that cover production. We shall be talking about farms, farm theories, different types of farm structures, market structures, perfect competition, monopolistic competition, monopoly, oligopolies. But to do that, we need to understand the nature of costs, how costs behave, the nature of production, the nature of technology. To do all of this is why we are starting off with something that is very, very important, which is the theory of production. Okay? We shall be looking at a general note on costs, what production is, okay, and looking at production as a source of well-being, right? In an economy, we shall talk about the factors of production, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Many of you will remember this from your business studies classes in junior secondary school. I'll just give a quick note on the circular flow of income in an economy, how income flows in an economy, right? This is the diagram you're seeing here. And then finally, the key of this lesson will be the law of diminishing marginal returns. Okay? It's really well captured by this English idiom that says, too many cooks spoil the broth. When you have too many people involved in cooking, often the result tends to not be as good. Okay? So, our attention will be on the theory of production. Remember, earlier, we noted down the principles of economics. We said economics can basically be divided into three areas, looking at how people make decisions, how people interact, and how the economy functions as a whole. Okay? When we look at how people make decisions, we consider the fact that people make trade-offs, right? Because of scarcity, people have to face trade-offs. You have to give up something to get something, right? That's why the definition of a cost in economics is basically the best alternative that you could have used that same resource in. That is the true cost of that activity in economics. Okay, and then we look at marginal decision making. Because people have to face opportunity costs, then the rational individual makes. Actually, what economics says is that there is no mistakes, no true mistake occurs. Right? This is, of course, an ideal, but it is a great place to compare everything else that happens in an economy. Right? So, rational decision makers, they take into consideration all necessary information before they make decisions, and that the rational individual, because they have to choose, they have to make decisions at the margin. Normally, you don't say, shall I spend all of my money to buy trousers? You say, shall I buy the next trousers? Okay, shall I spend the next hour studying? You don't say, shall I spend the whole day studying? So the rational individual makes decisions at the margin. This is similar for farms and businesses. They have to ask, what is the cost of hiring? Or what is the benefit of hiring the next employee? Shall I hire one more person? You don't say, shall I hire 20 more staff? Okay, at a go. People make decisions, rational decision makers make decisions at the margin. Marginal decision making is extremely, extremely important in economics. Right? And this is why an area of mathematics that deals with marginals, which is calculus, is really important. Because basically, derivatives are just marginals in economics. When we do applications of calculus, you see exactly how you can use derivatives to calculate marginals, right? Whether that is marginal cost, marginal profits, marginal revenue, all of these things are important to businesses, to farms, okay? And then we looked at the fact that people decide at the margin, they respond to incentives, right? They look at the prospects, this activity, will it give me more benefits or less benefits, comparing it with another one. So incentives matter. Incentives are basically rewards or punishment that results from taking a particular activity. And then, leaving from how people make decisions to how people interact, we found that trade makes everyone better, as I put here. You cannot be a teacher, be your farmer to grow your plantain, grow your oranges, produce your mobile phone, produce your telecommunication services, produce your own computer, and produce your own clothes at the same time. This is why we specialize in production. People specialize. You either become a teacher, you become a nurse, you become a trader, you become a doctor, but we generalize in consumption. We all want to wear clothes, we want to use calculators, we want to use telephones. We generalize in consuming, but we specialize in producing. Right? This is why trade makes everyone better off. So we can enjoy a whole range of things, but we only produce a little bit. Right? And then we also understood that markets are a good way of organizing economic activity. We especially looked at this when we talked on the theory of demand and supply, right? Where we summarize the behavior of consumers and producers. And then finally, on how people interact, we see that the government can often, sometimes, not always, improve market outcomes. Governments can intervene in markets to help improve the outcomes. Because sometimes, when we leave the market to itself, the outcomes it produces are not efficient for the society. Maybe a lot of pollution, maybe businesses are taking advantage of people. So the government often comes in where the market fails, especially in perfect markets, right? In competitive markets, rather. Sorry. Now, the last bit, how the economy acts as a whole, we won't touch about that because that is the realm of macroeconomics. Okay. So today, our attention is on the theory of production. First of all, I just want to give you a quick note on costs. In economics, when we talk about costs, we are referring to opportunity cost. Opportunity cost. Okay? Because often when this is often different from the way an accountant deals with costs. For accountants, costs are just the money, something you spend money on. What you take money, you pay. Okay, those are the categories they often consider when considering costs. But for the economists, the true nature of a cost is the best alternative of that resource. Okay, so this means often you have to factor in the work of the entrepreneur who is doing the production, okay, or the time and effort they are putting in. While maybe the accountant will just measure maybe the cost for just inputs you use in production. Okay, so the idea of opportunity cost tries to capture the underlying cost, the true nature of cost, right? Not just what you pay money for. So we won't talk about costs because once we talk about production and the law of diminishing marginal returns, the next thing we shall be talking about is the behavior of costs, right? Because the law of diminishing returns and the behavior of production is extremely important in discussing the behavior of costs in a farm. Okay? I made some notes here that I will be sharing with you in the description. So we see here, these are notes from Wikipedia. They define production as the process of combining various material and immaterial inputs in order to make something for consumption. Okay? So the result of production is consumption. This is what we all do. We consume. So in production, we bring together different inputs. This can be land, maybe you can bring different resources, you hire people, you buy machines, you put all of these things together, you coordinate them to produce an output for consumption. Right? So the purpose of production is consumption. In the act of creating an output, a good or service which has value and contributes. So output is a good or service which has value and contributes to utility of individuals. The idea of utility is extremely important in economics. It just refers to the enjoyment people derive in different activities in consumption. Okay, so output is a good or service that contributes to people's well-being, to people's enjoyment. Right? The area of economics that deals with production is what we refer to as the theory of production. Now, the value which we create during production, as we already talked about in demand and supply, is heavily signaled by the price that people are willing to pay. So price is really a good way of knowing the value we put on different outputs that we produce. If someone is willing to pay 800,000 for a mobile phone, that is a good signal to the value of that mobile phone. So that this is why, as much as possible in economics, we try to price things. Even sometimes utility, we try to find a way of quantifying it, right? So things like utility cannot be measured, right? But we try to find ways of measuring these things so they become easy to deal with for us to get insights from them. So price is a good signal of the value of a good. The amount you are paid as a teacher, the amount you are paid for brushing somewhere, is a good indication of how much people value that activity or the service you are producing. Okay? So I noted here, production is as a source of well-being. Right? So we say, in principle, there are two main activities in an economy. These activities are production and consumption. These are the two major activities happening in an economy. We are either producing or consuming. Businesses produce or they consume. Households produce or they consume. The government produces or it consumes. Okay? The government is one form of production, which is public production. The government produces services such as security. Okay, it produces goods that businesses cannot produce efficiently. So that's public production. Household production is another. Household production. We produce things in the house. Someone has to cook. Okay, someone has to go buy something in the market. Someone has to work. We produce things in the household, right? And also we have business production, so farm production basically. This is the realm of farm theory, which is exactly what we are talking about. Okay, so production takes place in three forms. It can be household production, it can be public production, it can be business production, which is businesses that are finding profits, who are producing new goods and services to satisfy well-being. Okay, so well-being is created during the process of production. How does this happen exactly? Well-being is made possible by efficient production and by the interaction between producers and consumers. Remember, we talked about the behavior of producers and consumers in the theory of demand and supply. Efficient production. Farms try to reduce cost. They try to find new types of technology to do the same thing at a lower cost. If farms can produce something at a lower cost, then now they can even charge less, but produce the same quality or even a better quality. So consumer well-being will improve. Okay? So this is often where improvements in well-being come from, through efficient production and when people interact. Okay? Customer well-being arises from commodities they are buying, and while suppliers' well-being is related to the income they receive as compensation for the production of the inputs. Okay? Right. Here is something. The degree to which the needs are satisfied is often accepted as a measure of economic well-being. In production, there are two features which explain increasing economic well-being. So in production, what explains when you see well-being in an economy or in a society increases, two features often explain this. Okay? They are improving the quality price ratio of the goods and services, as we talked about earlier. So maybe the price and the quality ratio, you produce something at a lower price. So now that means you can charge it. You can, if you used to buy the machines for 100,000 euros, now you can buy the same machine to produce your orange juice for 70,000 euros. Now it means you will be able to charge a lower price, but still make a higher profit in your production process. Okay, so improving the price and quality ratio is a good way, is one way where economic well-being increases. And another is increasing incomes from growing and efficient market production. Okay, so when people's income increases as a result of growing market production, when a country maybe finds out they have new oil reserves, or there is a new type of commodity that is being produced, increasing incomes resulting from efficient production also increase well-being. Okay, now people can buy more, they can enjoy more goods and services. So that's it. When I share the notes with you, you look at this more. Looking at production as a source of economic well-being. Now let's talk about the factors of production quickly. Okay, yeah, we won't want to take too long here. So the factors of production, okay? The factors of production are the resources people use to produce goods and services, okay? They are the building blocks of an economy. The factors of production. The land and all things that come from land, the labor, which is the efforts that people contribute to the production process, whether if you're hiring people in your new restaurant, or you're hiring new programmers in a software company you've opened, capital, the buildings and machines you use in the production, and entrepreneurship, people who coordinate land, labor, and capital for a profit. Okay, these are the building blocks of an economy. These are what has to come together for us to be able to produce. Right? So land is not just land. It requires every other resource that comes from land. This can be renewable resources or non-renewable resources. Water, of course, is a renewable resource. While maybe oil reserves, petroleum is a finite resource. If you overuse it, it runs out. The country does not have oil reserves anymore. Okay, forests can be renewable if they are taken good care of. You can always plant more trees and things like that. Labor is the effort people contribute in the production process, and capital, maybe you buy a new machine, a freezer to use in your production in your restaurant. That is all part of capital. Capital is what people use to produce goods and services. Okay, so this depends on the type of market or business we are talking about. For example, for a doctor, maybe a stethoscope or a thermometer can be a capital because he uses it in the production of his service, medical services. For a teacher, you can consider textbooks or maybe lab instruments to use in classes as a form of capital to produce a teaching service. Okay, so it depends. It depends. For some, like maybe delivery vans can be used by different businesses. That's also capital. They are used in production of a good or service, right? Entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs are people who take risks to produce goods and services. They coordinate land, labor, and capital resources, put them together in the production process so that they will gain a profit. Okay? It is through entrepreneurship. Often entrepreneurs are innovators, people who find new ways of using maybe old tools and old resources to produce new goods and services, or maybe just produce completely new goods and services that improve people's well-being. Without entrepreneurs, many of the changes we observe in our society will not be there. Okay? So those are the factors of production. As I said earlier, the flow of income is mostly about macroeconomics. Okay, but I'll just give a hint here because it's really important. Just you have a view about how income flows in an economy. Normally, we say production takes three forms. Okay, it can be household production, it can be business production, it can be public production by the government. Okay. Households serve businesses. Households serve the government. Similarly, the government serves households. the government also serves businesses. Just as equally, farms and businesses in an economy, they serve the government as well as serving households. So you see there is this flow. There is this flow. Resources moving from one end, they go into another sector, and into the other sector, they form the basis for the production, and then that sector produces it for another different sector. Okay? So households, they give labor and payments to businesses. Okay? Maybe you can be a shareholder in Africell or a company in your country. So you are giving payments to these businesses. Or say you are being employed by a new poultry in your community. You are giving your labor, your efforts to this company. They are using this labor and your payments to produce goods and services. Okay? So what do households receive for giving labor and payments to businesses and farms? Well, they receive income because you are paid at the end of the month. They receive new goods and services. Right? They receive income in the form of wages. You are paid. They receive income in the form of rent. If maybe they rent your land, you leasing a land, okay, pay you rentage for that, or a new business rents your house, they pay you rent. Or if you invest in a company, they pay you dividends at the end of the year from the profits they get. Dividends are the amount of the share of profits that are distributed to shareholders, people who are putting their resources together for a business to work. Okay, so this is what households gain for giving their labor and payments to businesses. Now, businesses, they often have to serve the government. They are an extremely important, that's why in every country, governments are always working very hard to make sure they attract businesses. The reason being is that businesses provide taxes to the government. Okay, there is a corporate tax rate in any country that businesses have to pay, maybe 20% of profits or 30% of profits, as the case may be. You pay this amount to the government. The government uses this money to produce goods and services for farms, but also for the private sector, for households. Okay, and also apart from just providing taxes to the government, businesses also produce the goods and services that the government buys. Remember that the government uses vehicles, the government uses telecommunications, the government has to build structures, build schools and offices. All of these goods and services have to come from the business sector. Okay? Similarly, what do the farms and businesses gain from doing this for the government? Well, they gain services such as maybe the rule of law, because this is extremely important. Countries that really succeed in producing a good business climate, the rule of law. The rule of law. If businesses know that someone can come and break into my shop and steal money and nothing can be done, or it will be really hard for justice to work, this will discourage businesses to operate in any economy. Okay? So the government produces legal services. It produces even sometimes telecommunication services. Good roads are also important. The government uses the money it gets from taxes to build roads that businesses can use to transport their goods and services. Okay? Yeah. They also even sometimes make payments to businesses. Government also often make payments to goods and services. Maybe there is a failing farm that needs to be rescued, or say maybe a particular farm is in a sector that is not growing enough. The government can come in and boost through payments. Okay, different methods. So as well as the government serves the businesses, the business serves the government in return gives something to businesses. Right? And finally, the households and government. Households, we are the people, every time if you are working, if you are employed, at the end of the month when you are paid, a percentage of your income is taken off as income tax. This money goes to the government. This can be 10%, 15%. It depends also on the different banks. Maybe for the first 10,000 euros, this is a percent, say 10% of that goes to the government. For the next 50% of your income, maybe for the next 20,000, say maybe 30% of that goes to the government. It depends on the different banks. Okay? So households pay taxes to the government, but also they give labor to the government. For example, teachers are employed by the government. Households are given this. Someone has to leave in the morning from their house to go and teach and lecture. Right? So therefore, households produce taxes and labor for the government. What do households get in return for these services? They receive public services such as good roads, electricity, they receive health services, building up of health structures, building of schools, paying teachers to teach our children. This is what households gain for the things they do for the government. They also gain incomes because people who work for the government are paid incomes. Okay? So this is how income flows in an economy. Remember, in all of this conversation, I have not talked about money. This is because money is not a factor of production. Please note this. Money is only a method of exchange. Okay? It only facilitates trade. But in itself, money on its own is in fact useless. It has no use on its own. It is only when it is used in the in buying factors of production, then it becomes useful. When it facilitates trade. So money is not a factor of production. Okay? It only facilitates exchange of goods and services. Right? Now we shall move our attention to talking about the law of diminishing marginal returns.